Alright guys, welcome back to Formula 1 News. Ferrari have given a further indication as to the timelines as to when their brand new SF25 is going to be hitting the tarmac. We know that we're going to see it in Bahrain. We know that we're going to see it at Fiorano just a day or so after the full reveal in London in just a few days' time. But it turns out Ferrari will actually reveal renders of their car on that very date. That's going to be the first chance to see all of the potentially radical modifications they have made compared to the other teams on the grid going into the new year. Red Bull, it seems, are also taking a pretty aggressive approach. Lots to say today. Very much interested in your thoughts in the comments. Hit the like button if you enjoy. Subscribe if you're new as always. Lots to say today from so many different teams. We're going to start with Alpine, and this is a story that it's not even worth mentioning, it feels like at times, because it feels like such an inevitability. But we know that Franco Colapinto's getting mileage in the car already, seemingly more so than Jack Doohan. Colapinto's probably getting paid more money than Jack Doohan is. Certainly his buyout from Williams was substantial. They're not going to do that to keep him on the sidelines. Look, many of us are just hoping that at least Doohan gets a shot at it. Like, I want to see how he can do, especially because Doohan knows there is a target on his back, which likely will be struck by Flavio Briatore. But at least if Doohan can, show something over the first couple of races in Australia, obviously China, Japan, however many opportunities he gets to prove maybe that he can be close to Gasly, maybe on Gasly's level. If he could manage that, then, it would be a hard decision. I don't think he will manage that. I think Colapinto's getting the drive, but already apparently in pre-season, in simulator work, Alpine are looking at the numbers, they're comparing Doohan, they're comparing Colapinto. They're probably putting Colapinto in the sim in similar testing conditions to what Doohan did in Abu Dhabi, and just seeing how he fares, just to, back up Briatore's perspective that he's going to be getting the drive. Pretty interesting circumstances at Haas. We know that last year, and for many years now, Esteban Ocon, as much as he's pretty quick and does tend to, when put in a position to either win a race or secure a podium, does tend to deliver. So, I rate Ocon reasonably highly, and last season he was beating Gasly until the drama, the French Civil War, which felt somewhat inevitable, certainly after Monaco. And Ocon does not have a great history when it comes to fair on-track battles with teammates. The Alonso years were certainly something to witness at Alpine, and it was the case with Gasly as well last season. So that's now done. He's going to Haas, but Ayo running a tight ship as he seems to over there, has decided, okay, not going to let that situation happen again. And apparently there will be papaya rules, but for Haas, basically, and they are going to give Ocon and Behrman what they consider to be rules of engagement before the season starts. I actually think this is a very good driver pairing, potentially. I rate Behrman very highly, and we saw that in his rookie attempts last year, the few Grand Prix that he raced at, that he can be very fast. Of course, notably outscoring scoring points in Baku ahead of Hülkenberg was a particularly impressive achievement that weekend. So, can he do the same to Ocon? Like, you'd expect Ocon to be faster. It's Behrman's rookie year at the end of the day, but I think there definitely will be weekends where these two are close to each other on track. Behrman can qualify particularly well. Ocon's good in that domain as well. So, there will be occasions where these guys are battling for position, you would imagine, and Haas want to ensure that there's no coming together, there's no dramas, they score points if it's possible to do so. They don't want any more Ocon shenanigans, I imagine, as to what we've seen over the last few years. So that's pretty interesting. Will it work in reality? Will it matter that much? These are some interesting questions. This is an interesting one as well here from Williams. They are supposedly going to be signing Atlassian, who I believe own Jira. You guys may have been familiar with that kind of platform and software. So they're looking for a title deal apparently with Williams, where it will be in the same way that it's Scuderia, Ferrari, HP, or it's Oracle, Red Bull Racing or whatever. There will be a similar idea, it seems, for Atlassian. So, fair play James Vowles, fair play Williams, get in the bag. I know there's a fair bit of excitement as well about putting Isaac Hadjar in the car at Racing Bulls. I think as well for Racing Bulls, there's a big debate on what the next year looks like for them, because many are saying that Lawson may get another year at Red Bull. I don't know about that. Look, Verstappen probably isn't going to go anywhere, but I do think that in terms of the driver lineups for 2026 and beyond, Red Bull is the situation in most flux, because Lawson could very much get annihilated by Verstappen. It's possible. It's happened before by others in his position. Verstappen could leave. Somewhat doubtful, but for 2026, if he really is convinced that Mercedes are going to have the best engine, and if Toto Wolff still wants him, which is possible as well, or if he thinks they're going to Aston Martin with obviously Adrian Newey and Honda is the way to go. I don't know if Max will do that in 26. I think absolutely he may do that in 27. I think it's a very realistic possibility if Red Bull don't nail the new regulations. Verstappen may go, but he may well stay. What's interesting is the Racing Bull situation, because they are preparing Arvid Lindblad to probably get the Racing Bull seat very shortly when he's old enough. Yuki Tsunoda will likely depart to some other team, you would imagine anyway. And that leaves Isaac Hadjar in a potentially quite good spot where he could keep the drive if he does well enough. But I also think there's absolutely a possibility of wholesale changes there. Because let's say Verstappen stays, but they don't feel like Lawson is the right guy. You know, there's potentially something in that. Will Hadjar do well enough to, you know, basically earn his spot maybe? Do I like a Hadjar-Lindblad combination? Not really, to be honest. Like, I'd prefer, like, I don't know, we'll see how Hadjar gets on and whether he can be as good as, you know, he's of course hoping that he will be. He does get some stick for his radio messages, so we'll see if that goes anywhere when the season begins, whether he's a Yuki Tsunoda 2.0 in the same team, let's not forget. Antonelli and Russell up, they're getting ready for the new season. There does seem to be an air of confidence around Mercedes, but I feel like this has always been the case over the last few years. Even Russell was saying how he's got himself targets in terms of what he wants to achieve in race pace, because last year, of course, excellent in qualifying, but in the race, Hamilton was largely still stronger on many an occasion. Russell will like to fix that, certainly if, as he believes, he will be Verstappen's championship challenger, or at least will give it a go for the upcoming season in whatever car that Mercedes potentially produce. Before we discuss Ferrari, this is an interesting piece on Red Bull. So we know that Mercedes, of the top 4 teams, are seemingly taking the most conservative approach. They are reasonably happy with their development, it seems, to take last year's car, try and give it a better aerodynamic base and run it from there. However, the other teams, McLaren are taking what they call a very extreme approach. Ferrari are replacing 99% of their car. So which camp do Red Bull fall into? Are they going to chase performance, or are they going to chase drivability? Mercedes, it seems, are chasing drivability, a car that has a high peak but is going to be more consistent than last year's car. McLaren and Ferrari are chasing both fundamentally, but they feel like performance is going to be critical, and that's where these discussions on the flexi wings has come into effect as well, and certain teams feeling like with the lack of flexibility and the aero elasticity of the front wing that it may be over for them in terms of generating good downforce. They may have to go about that a different way, and therefore it may create porpoising as a potential issue. So that's the risk you take maybe if you push it to extreme. But Red Bull are saying that they are happy to accept a car with a difficult working window if it means it's got the most potential. So this is what Red Bull are talking about, that if you increase the window of potential of the car. It is interesting this, because Helmut Marko, I think it was Marko anyway, said not long ago that what Red Bull really need to try and achieve is a wider working window so that they can be good at different circuit characteristic types and this type of thing. Whereas Red Bull, or Pierre Wache, is now saying that actually, if you increase the window, you reduce the overall limit and potential of the car. So I'm sure they're talking about the same problem but from slightly different angles. But Wache says that they want the fastest car, which means get the right window for each circuit and anticipate that. So the car is fast, but it's not necessarily so consistent if you get it wrong. Why would you want to extend the window and flatten the overall potential of a car? You want the fastest car compared to the others. I will not reduce the overall potential to make it easier operationally. You can reduce the potential to help drivers to use the car, but not to help engineers use the car. So this is Wache's perspective, that he would prefer a car with a smaller window, but a window that hopefully they can actually hit every weekend. If they don't, they're going to have a situation like 2024 all over again. So there is risk involved with this play. And I also think the risk is probably to Liam Lawson, because the reality is Max Verstappen is going to make it work. Give him whatever, he's going to be able to drive it to a reasonable level. It's last season where Sergio Perez had an absolute disaster for a significant portion of the season because he was struggling to make that car work for him. Max could get away with it until Max couldn't get away with it. And then Red Bull really realised the error of their ways. So that to me is the interesting piece of Red Bull next season. They are apparently taking a pretty aggressive approach. Like, they believe that if they design a car that's going to be more consistent, it's just not going to be quick enough to win the championship. So they're taking some risk to try and give Max a car that is capable of doing so, but at the risk of having some really woeful weekends and potentially at the risk of absolutely destroying Liam Lawson again, as has happened in the past. But Horner says, well, Lawson's driving style is more similar to Verstappen's than some others, so it's going to be fine. Of course, no more Adrian Newey at Red Bull as well. That is potentially a pretty big deal. He actually didn't rule out the possibility of working to some degree on the 2025 car. Newey starts his job on Aston Martin in about 3 weeks or so. I think it's the start of March. Of course, by that time, the car will be launched, the season is basically starting, so Newey's major focus, of course, and it currently is, I imagine, on the 2026 regulations and what that might look like for the team. But still, Adrian Newey will look at the 25 car and say, well, I'd maybe change this, change that, and may well therefore have some impact on the changes the team and the upgrades that, say, the teams bring towards the second half of the season. So, whether that happens or not, we'll see. Of course, mainly for Aston Martin, it's about 2026, but there's no guarantee that they are happy just accepting, let's say, 5th place in the championship in 2024 without trying to make some serious progress from there. But let's talk about Ferrari because, as they say here, a new Formula One season begins. Again, great graphical stuff, as they always tend to come out with lately. Around the new team, the SF25 is the name of the new car. It's now been designed, it's coming very shortly. The SF23, they said, was unprecedented in terms of speed. Last year's car was 95% different to that and was far better and more consistent in terms of the race. This year's car is 99% different to last year's car, mainly in terms of front suspension geometry. That's been a particularly big deal, and well, these are the images of the team getting ready for the new season, and we shall be seeing it all in person rather shortly. The timeline is, all of the teams will reveal their car. Well, they are going to reveal the livery of their new car on the 18th of February in London. It is very likely, basically all of those cars will be on show cars, as in it's going to be last year's Ferrari model, but with the new livery, so we're going to get to see what the shade of red is on the Ferrari. What I'm interested in is like the aerodynamic analysis that people far smarter than me do when the cars are launched, looking at the airflow. What does the front wing look like? How does the floor look now compared to last year? All of these other factors potentially in play. We will get to see that for the first time earlier than we initially thought. On the 19th of February, Ferrari are doing their show run day at Fiorano with Leclerc, with Hamilton. That's going to be their big launch. That's far earlier, to be fair, than other teams that are largely waiting to show their real car until Bahrain testing or in a shakedown before Bahrain testing, stuff like that towards the end of February. Ferrari, as is the Ferrari way, are going to do their own thing. They're going to do it at Fiorano and they're going to have a big song and dance in the media about it while they show their new car for the very first time. And this will be the actual piece of machinery, you would well imagine, that they are coming out with for the new season. So their plan is actually not just to show it on the 19th, but actually to reveal the images of it on the 18th. So there's going to be, it's going to be all about Ferrari, to be fair, those couple of days, because the other teams seem to be waiting longer, and this is a pretty big deal. How important those renders will be, as in, the pictures they come out with, which are not going to be looking like this, but you know what I'm saying? The pictures they're going to come out with, will the car that they show in the render be the real car that they're going to have for the new season? It's likely that the render has already been made and will be based on a version of the SF25 that is maybe even a month old, whereas the actual car that they will produce for the season may have some finer refinements. But the reality is it's not going to be long until we get to see especially the Ferrari for the very first time and can start to really dive into the details of what they've changed on the car and whether it's going to make it better or worse than last year's model. So intrigued your thoughts on that in the comments below. Just one final thing, Ben Sulayem is at it again. The FIA are never far out of drama. We can never go a week without some FIA related drama, and of course it's Friday, so there had to be something today. And Ben Sulayem says, after firing Vitic, right, Niels Vitic, the race director last year, after some strange drama, I don't even know why he fired him, whatever, that's the decision they made. And, well, maybe it wasn't Ben Sulayem that fired him, it was the executive team, which maybe Ben Sulayem has a controlling vote over, whatever. There are going to be multiple directors, race directors this year. This is one of the problems that we've mentioned for years. And all the teams talk about it as to like, hey, can we get some consistency, please, guys? Like the idea of rotating race directors, not having the same guy every single weekend. always sounds like a bit of a disaster, because let's say something like Mexico happens, the next weekend you go to discuss it with the race director to say, okay, what can we change? And the race director weren't there last week, so what's he going to say? So, I mean, how are we a serious sport when we've got stewards who aren't even getting paid, we've got race directors who don't even do this as their full-time job, and apparently the FIA is perfectly fine with that, and at least in my opinion, not seeming like an especially serious sport. But very much interested to your thoughts on all of this stuff in the comment section below. Hit the like button if you enjoyed, subscribe if you're new, take care, and I'll see you next time.